I think you can also listen to him on his podcast, The Six-Figure Developer, which he does with John. So, great pleasure to introduce Clayton. Big developer.
Thank you. It's on. All right, 1 second. Let me get this mic on, or drop it. So, as you may have seen, well, here's my email. Everybody wants to know. The talk tonight is centered around the fact that JavaScript's going to die. So I actually switched from being a full stack developer to front end primarily a few years ago, and unfortunately did it right when .NET Core was about to come out, and Angular and Angular and React and all that stuff was in a very fluent and moving state. So I made the bad decision. I went with Angular. Has anybody else made that decision? Anybody else doing Angular? Oh, fantastic.
Why do you call it a bad decision?
Well, I think they all suck, but Angular seems to have gotten less community around it. One of the benefits of Angular 1 was that, especially after John Papa released his GitHub stuff on GitHub, there was kind of like a way to do Angular, and it was straightforward, it was easy, it was great, it was fantastic, loved it in the 1.5 days. When Angular 2 came out, there was a framework that looked like it provided a whole lot of guidance and rigid, this is how you write a front-end app, and it really did. The CLI was not there during the earlier days when you had to kind of choose whether you were going to do React or Angular 2, and it took like 3 days to get an Angular app working, but I hated React even more, so I did it anyway. But now React has what seems like the majority of the following, and although Angular's doing some cool stuff, I don't know, I don't like TypeScript. And you're forced to do TypeScript now. So on Vue, I haven't done a whole lot of Vue, but at this point I'd probably prefer it over Angular because it's only what you need when you need it. You can do a simple application that just does old school like Knockout or Angular 1 components that kind of stand by themselves, or you can go all the way to a whole build process and building out a large app. So it's a framework that can kind of grow with your app, which is nice. As Santosh pointed out, I am one of the co-hosts of the Six-Figure Developer podcast. I'm also a co-author of the Practical Tester of Development using C#. That's my Twitter, and if you're interested in the code, there is the GitHub link to the code. It'll be back up later if you miss it now. So, first thing up is, well, here, let me, I kind of want to run the application so you can actually see it. That smoke took me a really long time to do.
Your PowerPoint's on fire, man.
That's not PowerPoint.
Oh,
That's
your app.
Yeah, that's my app.
Is that nice?
No, that's JavaScript and Canvas and. I actually like JavaScript. I don't like the frameworks that are coming out now, and I don't like TypeScript because it's trying to be C#, but then it doesn't do C# things very well. I don't need all the typing in my JavaScript. Okay, so I'm gonna leave that up. I changed my Angular applications route to be bad. so that it would render out my screen. Because unfortunately, when I was making this talk originally, I spent like 3 days making this screen because I was like, oh, there's going to be loading time. And what there is a whole lot of C# and the debug on my computer taking forever to even do anything.
Is this client-side Blazor or server-side?
Well, right now it's just Angular. Yeah, it's just, did it get mad at me? It may have gotten mad at me because I changed the... There we go, okay. So, here's the app that we're going to be converting from an Angular app to a Blazor app. We're going to try to do it as step-by-step as possible so that it's not a big rewrite. I actually kind of like music. It's not a big rewrite, but more of something that you can transition in your own work at your job. But just as an example, it's kind of like a complicated to-do list. I based it off of Skyrim. That's why it looks the way it does. So when you hover over a quest line, you get to see all the tasks in that quest. You can complete them, uncomplete them, and if you complete all the tasks, then the quest moves down to a completed state. The miscellaneous, however, stays. Oh, and sorry, you can also select a quest as being active. So, one of the nice things is if I select, if I select this one just by hovering over it, and then I go to admin, it's already selected for me in the admin page. I can do on-the-fly changes, and if I reset, then it resets both views of it, and I can also edit tasks in the same way. But that's pretty much it. It's just a couple layers deep to do that. When you guys are doing your front-end applications, how are you accessing your data? Do you just have like an Angular service or like a React Redux thing going on? You have a service? Yeah, just like a service class that's calling. Yeah. Okay. So that's typically what we've done. But for this, I have found that it's easier to convert your Angular application to use the app state pattern. At least that's the name that, I can't remember his name right now. The guy who made Blazor. That's what he called it. Yes, Steve Sanders. And so the first step, if you wanted to do this on your own, is to convert whatever method you're using for updating and maintaining the data within your application to the app state pattern. The app state pattern's actually, the app state pattern is actually pretty easy to do. If we go and look at services, state. So it's just, let me make that a lot bigger. Maybe too big. Can everybody see that? Okay. So if we go and look, it's you can ignore some of, I am connected to something. You can ignore some of this stuff because that's just how I'm choosing to do the updates. I'm cloning a task or a quest so that when I modify the title, I still have something that I can undo. That was my decision. That's not actually part of the pattern. But the pattern is just having a single class that maintains your state. In this case, it's a list of quest lines that are in an observable. And anytime you get data, you update the state within this class, and then you send a message to your components that say the state has updated, go and look at it. And that is this function here. And all it's doing is it's just popping the new list, the new version, onto the main observable that is the state of the application. in your components, you would have to add this piece in the constructor, or I suppose you could do it in, well, this is the real part. This is just telling it to go and get stuff anytime this changes. But whenever the component changes the state, it can also call that method, which then forces all the other components to go, oh, I got an update, let me go do something. Have anybody already seen Blazor talks? A couple people? Okay. We'll get to it in a second, but there's a method in Blazor called state has changed. And whenever you do an asynchronous update, you have to call that, because otherwise Blazor has no idea something has changed. So this is similar to that. But the only difference between this application and a normal Angular application is that I have modified the service layer to be the app state pattern. So the next thing that we would need to do after we've accomplished that, which you could do this and it wouldn't affect your application, it's still a complete Angular application, so it's something you could do over time, converting all your services. The next thing we need to do is convert to Angular elements. I assume that there is an analog for this both in React and Vue, although I don't know for sure. Is anybody familiar with Angular elements? No? One person? Okay, so Angular elements is a way to take your Angular components and make them standard web components. So you can take whatever you've got and turn it into something that you use standalone in the browser, just like any other tag that you would have in your HTML. This formatting got all messed up, and I was unable to edit my PowerPoint once I stuck it into my GitHub project for some reason. But in the app module, you just have to add all of your components that you want to expose as web components. You have to add them as entry components. And then in the app component, you have to do this part in the constructor where you create a custom element for each of the components that you want to expose. And you register the custom element down there at the bottom. This part here where your custom element's not defined. So you're saying, this is the name of the element in HTML once it's a web component. And then you pass it the custom element that you made above. What that looks like with syntax highlighting is something I'll have to show you in just a second. So the repo is broken out into master, which is just an Angular application, Angular elements, which is what we're about to see, and then the steps that we would have to do for Blazor. So once it's an Angular elements app, then what we see is in the app module, or maybe without syntax highlight, there it is. So here's what I was saying with the entry components. So you just list all of your components that you want to expose. And in the app components, here's where we are defining a constant for each custom element that we want to create based on our components. And then we're defining, we're actually assigning the custom elements to the browser. And then the last thing you have to do is provide a place where these can actually be put into the web. So let me make sure that we haven't done anything here yet. Yeah. So in the index.html, I think we haven't used any of the custom elements yet. But they are created, and the application still runs. So you don't have to, you can create them without using them, and it doesn't affect anything. It takes a really long time for just IIS Express to fire up for some reason on my machine. Hopefully there won't be too many of these though. Any questions so far? Questions about Angular elements or anything?
So the reason you made it an Angular
yeah, here in a second, what we're going to do is create the Blazor application, and then we're going to instead of having a Blazor component or just a div, we can use the Angular element inside the Blazor app, and it should work. So here's, nothing really has changed about the application. It still functions same as it did. Whole lot of waiting for not a lot of data. But I'm just, I want to show that it's very step by step. At no point can you not run the application. So after we've done that, the next thing is to add Blazor. So as with all the other code samples, these take some significant amount of time to actually accomplish. So I would love to do live coding, but I can't for this. But just create a whole other project or solution that is a Blazor application, and then copy over all of the important Blazor pieces, which if you hit F5 and it doesn't run, you haven't got all. There are a couple gotchas, which we will go look at now. Yeah. Dancing music. Okay. So on to Blazor step 1. All right. And now here's where everything has changed. We're not really going to do a whole lot with the Angular app going forward. I think we make one more change really to the Angular app. Everything else is going to be mostly in Blazor. So we're going to shrink that up. So the changes that we've made now, if you noticed earlier, I clicked on the index.html file that was inside the Angular app. Once we switch over to Blazor, we're not using that file anymore. So we had to kind of copy that file down into the Blazor host file. And what you can see here is the exact same stuff that I had earlier with the C# is awesome and JavaScript sucks. And that is my Angular app root. But now I've added a Blazor app root with just a different tag name. And we're going to render it server side. There's also, these are added just recently in preview 9, I think. So there's also a server pre-render, which is what actually should be there. If you just do server side, then it runs very much like the client version, where there's this time frame where nothing's showing. If you run it pre-rendered, then it's much faster. I don't know why they made a difference. Okay, so we had to copy all that HTML into this file, and we added this line with the app tag, and we added this line with the Blazor server JS, which is just the bootstrap file for Blazor. Startup is where I think the largest change happens. So we had to add Razor pages. We had to add server-side Blazor. This add circuit options is so that we can get better error messages in dev. That's also relatively new. The add spa static files was already there as part of an Angular project in C#. Add quest data is just how I'm initializing my database stuff. Let's see. The is development, use exception handler, use XSTS, that's all standard. Use HTTPS redirection, that was already there. Use static files was already there. Use spa static files was already there. Use routing was already there. Authorization was already there. I believe we had to change this use endpoints. So what we did for the, did I get louder? What we had to do for the use endpoints, we had to do this to tell it to fall back to the host file, the host CSHTML file, instead of somewhere else. It was falling back to that index.html file, but now we're going to fall back to host. And that's where we add in the Blazor hub. I believe so, yeah. Which I'd love to signal on here. It's like it's not there. You don't have to think about it at all. It's beautiful.
Do you know if there's the extension to save off abilities when you go into a farm?
I do not. I would think, I mean, you probably might have to dig for it. I think this takes in options. configuration. Yeah, configure options. So I would hope that anything you can do with SignalR you can add in here, but I have not gotten that far. I don't really know SignalR all that well.
Yeah, I mean, typically once you do a farm, you're using like Redux upsell,
Yeah.
end up keeping the servers the same.
That curious because it's behaving like a client-side application. Yeah, and you should maintain, once you create that WebSocket, you should maintain connection to the same server.
Yeah.
So, but I really don't know. And then this last part, the use spa stuff was already there. We're not having to change any of that. Did I change something? Let's just not change whatever it was. Okay. Well, that's this file though, not the. I don't know. So then the rest of it's really basic Blazor stuff. I kind of gutted what was already there, and I added in the nav links, which are hard to see. John's going to tell me, oh, you shouldn't use Lightning. So these nav links are, they're kind of like a route link. In Angular, the router links. Same concept, just in Blazor. And they take a relative path URL. But there are examples of those when you create a new Blazor application. So copy, modify, just like you're on Stack Overflow. And then for the nav menu, I've got more of the nav links because I've got two navigation pieces. Oh, well, that's theirs, which I'm not even using. But I left it in there because it's part of the default application. So here is where we start to use the Angular elements. This is my home page for my Blazor application, and inside the home page, I am placing the Angular element that is the quest element, and then that should run just like it's in Angular, but it's not. Same thing for the admin component. All I'm doing is running my admin element. So those are my two pages that I have in Angular, and I just put them on pages in Blazor. Standard imports, and those are regular API controllers, and that's it. So now when we run, so it actually is already slow, but that's this computer. But now when we run, it's actually going to be a little slower because we're running two processes. And then in the next step, it gets a bit slower, and then the third step, fast. that wouldn't make for a very good C#. But you can see the slowness. So the Blazor part ran quick and got that stuff up, and now we're waiting for Angular to initialize, and then it's gonna call and do all the API stuff and whatnot. But it's still spinning.
So is it downloading the whole Angular,
It's downloading the entire Angular application, and it's downloading the entire Blazor application.
And then it's now spinning up the Angular stuff inside of the
Right.
Okay.
As long as we haven't gone to error. Not yet. Yeah, it's painful, is what it is. It is faster on I don't know what's up with my machine. It's a good machine, but I guess it's 3 or 4 years old now, so there we go. Alright. But you see, even though we're running sort of in Blazor, sort of not in Blazor, all of the stuff still works. I can still Yeah, this part is Blazor. But you'll notice that so I'm using my Angular elements, so the state management between the two pages, even though now I'm switching Blazor pages and not Angular pages, the state management still works because my create to-do list is selected, but if I come down here and I select the demo features, then demo features is the one that's selected now. So everything still works the same way it did, even though now I've got an Iger application. But it's that simple. All I had to do was import. It did take a while to figure out the startups, yes. Some of that stuff was confusing. The Blazor server side doesn't want you to use web API controllers, and so it took me a while to figure that out. And then also to make sure that I didn't accidentally delete anything that Angular needed while adding the stuff that Blazor needed. But you can see in the end, I mean, it wasn't that much code. So, and this stuff's all on GitHub, so if you try this, hopefully you'll have something to look at. Okay, so close it. That's basically it for that step. After we've done it, pretend like something changed there. Did I just copy the... whatever. Okay. So then the next thing we have to do, this is the tricky part. So we want to move the state management into Blazor so that we can start using Blazor components, which means we have to move the state management out of Angular. The way that you have to do this is by creating static functions that Angular can call in Blazor to use the Blazor AppState class that we created, and then relay that information back to Angular. So, yeah. I created this originally in Preview 7, so all I did today was get it up to RC1. Yeah, we're running on RC1, but I haven't tried instance methods. Oh, no, go back. Surprise. Okay, so now we'll switch to the next part. Did stash. Pretend like nothing happened. Stash. Wow. Force check. I don't care. Yeah. Okay, there we go. And now I've broken everything. Okay, so the changes that we've made now really aren't that significant for Blazor. We've moved it down one level. So we've taken the quest element and the admin element, and I've gone in and found the pieces in Angular that made those up. So there was, the list of quest lines, and then there was the list of tasks and the display of the information about the quest and those kinds of things. Those are now broken out, and I'm now using the active quest listing element that's an Angular component, and the completed quest listing element, which is an Angular component, so on and so forth. But I've only moved it down one level. And now I've added onState changed, because when the Blazor state updates, I have to update the page. And I've done the exact same thing for the admin page, just moved it down one level further into the Angular element components, and I've added state change. I have created the Blazor request state, which is the app state pattern, and to create this, I just took the Angular code and I copied it and I pasted it, and then I fixed all the red stuff. And that's all I did. I had to remove observables because, I could have used them, I suppose, but I didn't use them. And I just went down to standard iList and things like that. In fact, the data calls are even so close that all I really had to do was add JSON async and the type that I was using. Yes, in the back? Shut up. Well, so one thing working in Blazor that you'll find is that it does not play well with the IDE sometimes, especially if you have ReSharper installed. Huge swaths of things will be red, and they're not really red. Just hit F6, find out they're really red. Close Visual Studio and open it 3 or 4 times. Sometimes it'll sync up, sometimes it won't. That's not actually squiggles. Those are fake squiggles. Unless I hit F5, and then it tells me they're not fake squiggles. And then you get to see some live code. All right, but it's the exact same class. Literally just change the things that I had to change. Everything else is the same. But if we go and look what we had to do to the Angular app, this is what I was talking about earlier. Where I missed one thing in the main layout. We had to do this awful nonsense. I mean, it's fantastic that we can do it, but it's ugly. It is JS invocable, so I'm saying that I can call this method from JavaScript, and at least at the time when I made it, they had to be static functions. So I put them in main layout so they'd be immediately available once the Blazor app was loaded. Because when I tried to put them where I thought they belonged initially, what would happen is Blazor would load, but not that part of Blazor, and then Angular would try to load, then it would try to call something that it couldn't find, and it got mad at me. So I just put them in basically in main. That's what you got to do sometimes. But for each one of these, I'm just effectively calling the app state. You can see this quest state.quest, and I'm returning whatever my app state has, or I'm taking the expected action on my app state and then returning the result. Blowing up if anything fails, because this isn't for production. All right, in the JavaScript, or TypeScript rather, the only thing that we really had to do is change the service and make it a lot uglier. Because now we have to invoke the .NET method. Now it's not too bad, but it's not great. And I had to go from observables to promises, because that's what the invoke method async does. I could have converted it, but why not? So it's just .NET invoke method async, and then you have to provide your assembly name, and then the method that you want to call. And this is the static method, not like the quest state method that you want to call. And then you receive the response. And you do whatever it is that you were doing anyway. So in this case, we're going to take the response, we're going to map it to the correct model type, and then we're going to store that in our underscore quests, which is our hidden quest state. And then we're going to say, all right, now update the observable that is pushing out to all the components. And it's just more of the same going down. Anywhere that we were just calling Ajax, now we're going to call the .NET methods. But that's basically it. Everything else in the whole app stays the same. It's not super pretty, but also not super difficult. Now here, so it gets slower again because of the communication that we're doing back and forth between. And there's this bar that's now shown up that should have been there the whole time. I don't know how I got deleted from earlier versions. So we're waiting in the same point we were before, waiting for Angular to initialize. And I don't know if the slowness is just because Angular is slow, or if the Angular elements are slower than normal Angular. You notice, like when it was just an Angular app, it still took a really long time to load. Whereas now that we've started moving towards Blazor, the Blazor portion of it loads up a lot faster than the Angular was. So it might just be running Angular in the environment that I'm running in. I'm sure if this was in production, it would not be this slow. Hey, there we go. And it has the same state it had before, where we can do this kind of stuff. And that still works. So everything still works, but now every single one of these things is its own Angular element component. They're not housed in anything anymore. Unfortunately, this is where step 3.5 goes missing. It's not here, unfortunately. It is extremely difficult to do what I would have liked to have done next. I wanted Blazor components and Angular components living together. Like, I want to change the thing listing the quest lines to a Blazor component, but leave the task listing that was showing the tasks for the quest line. Wanted to leave that as an Angular component. I tried to have the Angular service update the Blazor service, and the Blazor service update the Angular service. I could not find a way to not get an infinite loop. So, unfortunately, once you get to this point, you then have to do a large jump. Killed it. You have to do a large jump at this point. You only have to do it for related components, though. So, we could change out the quest listing and the task listing without changing out the admin section, except some of the state modifications that we were doing may not show up the way that we would want them to. And that's really the detriment. It's when you have those related state modifications is when you would have a problem with this. If you have an application where the state is all one direction, you may not have that problem. But we will now convert everything else to Blazor. And like I said, the Angular components, the Angular services, it really is just copy everything over and then change all the red stuff to the Blazor equivalent. It's super simple, and I think that it would be simple with React or anything else as well. It might be slightly simpler because TypeScript. But I don't like to admit that. Okay, so now, in this new branch, let me check and make sure that we're doing the right thing real quick. Yeah, convert Angular components to Blazor is what it sounds like. And you must convert component chains at the same time. So if anything's talking to stuff, then that has to be converted at the same time. I've left client app in there. We're not using it. I've just left it in there, kind of for reference. But the changes that we've made are, why are those all not in the project? I ran it earlier, I don't think it matters. So we've added a whole bunch of components. One component for every Angular component, basically. Oh, you guys can't really see all that, can you? For example, here is a component for the Angular quest, or sorry, admin quest edit component that was in, sounds weird, in Angular, and I've changed index to main, I believe. So there's main and admin. And then for main, here is a quest listing and a task listing. They don't look like much because there's not really much there. They are just whatever was in Angular, and it's a simple application, so pretty simple. But now when we run it, it'll go a lot quicker. I mean, there's still this part. Waiting for my computer to launch IIS apparently, but then boom. So, and that's faster than it was when it was just an Angular. We have lost some stuff though. For example, I've been demoing the ability to live edit these titles the whole time. That doesn't work anymore. Now, I'm still effectively doing the same thing, but the two-way binding in Blazor doesn't provide me the opportunity to do a state has changed. I might be able to accomplish this with a getter and a setter. I haven't tried that yet. But in general, if you're doing a property binding and you're expecting to be able to live update, that won't work. So if it's something that your app depends on, you might have to find another way to do it. But I still have the cloned object, so I can still come down here, reset it, and all that stuff. All that still works. I can come over to here, and I can select the to-do list, and then when I go to admin, it's already selected. Literally the only thing that doesn't work is the live editing of the titles. So you all said that you have not done a whole lot with Blazor. So now that it's a full Blazor application, how much time we got? We got a little bit of time. Either I've been talking fast or, anyway, we got a little bit of time, so we can walk through some of this now. When you create the Blazor app, you'll have, it's missing. You'll have index.razor, and that's kind of your main landing page for the application. You just use simple HTML for most everything. I think I definitely prefer the music. If you are creating a component, such as this quest list, you see I've got this custom parameter, this custom HTML attribute quests. The way that you can do that, I can't have 12. Yeah, it's just a parameter. So, how many people have done Razor? Just normal Razor. Okay. So in Razor, there's a functions, like at functions, and then you type stuff. For Blazor, they decided to make it at code. But parameters now have to be public, and the only thing you have to do is put the parameter attribute on it, and then it becomes something that you can add into your component. The file name of your Razor file is the name of your component. So whatever you name that, whenever you go to use it, you just go into some other component file and type the name of that component inside of an HTML element, and it'll recognize it. And then you can add any of the parameters that you have. Yes, everything is a component. Even the if you go like the real root of everything is app, and this app.razor file is just another component, but it's a component that it doesn't know about. But if you go and you look at the host CSHTML file, which is the host CSHTML file is the core of Blazor. It's the one thing that isn't necessarily a component, but it's a CSHTML file, not a .razor file. Yeah, and if we go here, so it is aware of your Blazor components, which is why we can use the app tag, which is going to be the app component after this render component async finishes. Actually, we could probably call this whatever we want. I'll bet that works. Let's find out. Let's experiment one on.
I think you're actually referencing back to the class because you registered it at one point. So it ends up using almost like the web component name for it here.
Yes, doesn't care.
It's just a tag. It's just a tag.
Yeah. So any tag that certain browsers. So the important part about this though is that certain browsers will not recognize unregistered tags. So if you are shooting for IE6, which you can with Blazor, you can do Blazor in IE6. You can't do Angular, can't do React. You can do Blazor. But if you were shooting for that, then you, instead of app, you might want to use like div. And then you know that tag's going to be recognized. I thought at least the styling would have changed. That's kind of impressive. All right. Yes?
So you did a similar talk at Clayton.
Yes.
Now,
Where I couldn't get the screen working.
But was that was that a native
That one.
Then you converted your Angular. That what you showed us there was the converted.
Now you're going to make me tell my secret. I created the Angular app based on the Blazor app.
So you basically built the Blazor app first. Well, I'm sitting there, I'm like, he did this in Blazor in March.
Yeah.
Oh, so you went
yeah.
and did an Angular app.
I made the Blazor app for that talk at Code Camp.
Yes.
And then
Sorry.
I wanted to do something other than just kind of like an intro to Blazor.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, what would be interesting? Ooh, well, like a lot of people are working in some application already. If we could convert the application, that would be awesome. Well, I didn't want to come up with another application idea. I spent a long time making that smoke work. So
3 days.
So I kind of reverse engineered it. But
I like it.
the only thing I did differently from a normal Angular application that I would have written is the app state pattern. That's the only thing that I did differently. And next year, I'm actually going to start brute forcing my company. We've got an Angular application as our main website application. And sometime this year, I'm going to replace the Node server with a .NET server. And then shortly after that, I'm going to start putting in stuff that I need for Blazor to work. And then next year, I'm going to start trying to do this process. The one thing that I kind of need to work for this process at work is that component interaction between a Blazor component and an Angular component. And it goes one way just fine. If the Blazor is surrounding the Angular component, everything works fine. But if you need side-by-side Blazor and Angular components to communicate, there's an issue with just the updating of the state. You need to get that one-way data flow basically that everybody always talks about without it triggering another round.
I wonder if you could use a circuit breaker pattern to end up actually canceling out the second refresh.
Oh, maybe. I was kind of in the weeds when I was trying to get it to work. I had like 2 days before the .NET meetup in St. Pete, and I was like, work. Yeah, so I was pulling late nights and stuff, and then it was like a day before the meetup, and I'm like, you know what? We'll just skip that step. They won't notice.
The app state pattern, is that something that they recommend, or is that the way to do it? Or, I mean, you know.
I'm not entirely sure.
Like, where did you come up with that?
So Steve Sanderson mentioned it in a talk that he gave at NDC. I think it was either London or Oslo, I think. 6 months maybe, something like that. And I found for doing the kinds of updates that you do in a web application, it worked really well. Are you familiar with Redux? Okay, so the reason that Facebook created Redux was because they had an issue. The reason that they gave is on the Facebook page, they've got at the top they've got like a notifications icon, and at the bottom they've got the chat thing, and they were having trouble keeping the chat and the notifications icon in sync. They were, separate components, distant away. One's in the header, one's in the footer. They have no way to communicate. And so, instead of doing something simple, they created a whole other framework and invented a pattern that already existed for 30 years.
That's up for them.
But that was their solution, and Angular doesn't really give you a solution for that. There are ways that you can manipulate the observables to get that to work, but if you're working in a decent-sized team, you're probably going to get 4 or 5 people disagreeing about how to make it work correctly, and then you end up with a big ball of mud that nobody likes. This pattern, though, solves it. It's simple, it's straightforward, it's clean, so I like the way that it works out. As far as them actually promoting it, the only time I've heard it mentioned is during that talk. And I think that the Blazing Pizza workshop uses it, but that's the only 2 places that I've actually seen it used, except for, in my own experiments. But it works out wonderfully. I did make one extra large because my quests and my tasks are in it, and I would probably separate those in reality. But I still got some time. Yeah. So
Question,
this is RC1, yeah.
Is that, that's server side, right? You're talking about server side?
Yes, it's all server side.
I haven't seen it much on client side Blazor. Is that still a preview or what's the status?
Yes, it's still in preview. They actually, when they released RC, gotta stop talking with my hands or something. I'll just talk with this hand. I'll be not left-handed for a little while. So when they released RC1, they also released, it's still labeled Preview 9, but they did release a Preview 9 update to the WebAssembly client, Blazor. They still have some issues that they want to get cleaned up, and so they're not going to release it officially until later. The last time that we talked to Dan Roth on our podcast, he was really hoping for first or second quarter next year. Just the way they've been talking about it, I think it might even be closer than that. But no guarantees because they haven't announced it yet. So.
Yeah, whenever they officially decided it's no longer experimental, it's now on the .NET Core long-term support plan. But once again, no timeline. It's just going to be one of those rollout tooling that they're going to do.
The part that frustrates me is for server side, you're supposed to use HTTP Client Factory. For client side, you're supposed to use HTTP Client. That's like, why make them different? What are you thinking? And HTTP Client Factory is way more difficult to use. So, for anybody else who wants to do this, if you're doing server side and you have the API methods in your controllers in the same application, what you can do is add in this little bit here, and what that does is that registers HTTP client for server-side Blazor, and then you can use it just like you would on client-side. Much nicer. If you don't want to do that, then what you have to do is create a class like this that does all the interactions with the HTTP Client Factory so that you don't have to. Yeah, no, the dependency registration is much easier.
Yeah, I think that comes back to the fact, though, that the WebAssembly version runs mono.
It might, but I mean, like,
it's not running .NET Core, it's running mono.
Pretty soon it'll be running forward.
yeah, they are taking the mono and updating it to, well, they're folding it in or whatever, right? But Blazor is super easy to learn for anybody that's been doing any amount of .NET for any amount of time, especially on the website. I suppose if you're web forms or whatever, it'd be a little bit harder. Yes?
Well, so, yeah, I'm just going to go with that. If you're from an MVC background, like I'm not a big fan of single-page applications, but only probably because of the way they've been implemented in the past. But do I have to do I don't have to do a single-page application in Blazor, do I?
No, I actually saw something, well, I mean, technically, you don't have to think about it that way, though.
Well,
It's,
is it still taking over all of routing as opposed to actually server-side routing?
yes, it does do the routing. However, I saw a thing about using Blazor in MVC components. So I think that you can use a Blazor component that's not routed in your MVC components, and it'll work.
I read that same article.
So you can do a slow transition from a single page versus non-single page application. There's really no detriment to doing Blazor and just having it be a single page application. The only downside that I've got right now with Blazor is in fact the routing. There are common pieces of UIs that get used over and over and over again, like a user administration section, right? But in this app, or that app, that user administration might need to be at a different URL, which means that I can't take that user administration and put it into a NuGet package and then reuse it. Because the way Blazor routes is all based off of the actual location of the actual files in the actual project. So I can add more assemblies to the router, but it's going to route those assemblies based on the path that they are in that package, which I don't like, and I don't know why they haven't done a modular routing system. Even if I could just say, load this assembly at this relative base, that would be fantastic, but I haven't seen it yet. There's a GitHub issue where they said that they're going to do something like that, but I haven't seen them do anything with it yet. But that's literally the only downside to using Blazor over like MVC or something.
The other thing that I would think about is you're maintaining client state on the server. So it's such a state page has to get those deltas that need refreshed. So if you're like in my spot where I gotta handle 50,000 people on a site at the same time, I can't go Blazor on like a pure SPA. I have to end up going that way. I can, Blazor components with SPC.
Well, so the way spas normally work though is atomic operations. So if I'm going to make an update in Blazor or in an Angular spa, React spa, or Vue spa, I'm going to take that action and fire it off to the server immediately. It's going to do whatever it's going to do, and then I don't have to worry about keeping that state. It's not in the session. It's not anywhere. It's just like this one page has this slice of information that I'm going to update it or whatever. So your 50,000 users using, like, say, WebAssembly version of Blazor, they can run it. You're putting a lot of the processing on them instead of on your server.
Right. I'm talking about the server side one with a single R.
It's still the same situation though, so you still treat it as atomic modifications. So you're still making small modifications anytime something happens. You're not keeping this huge session state and then pushing like a massive set of updates. You're pushing the individual updates. Wow. What was that?
Is it actually doing like manually with Ajax and stuff? Is it actually able to modify the
Yeah. So the question was, how does it update the actual page when it's doing an update? It does it very much like the Shadow DOM for React does. It sends. Okay, when you're doing Entity Framework and you modify an object, the object gets flagged as dirty, and then that dirty data is what gets saved. If you pull down a whole list of things but you don't modify but one of them, only the one of them is going to get updated when you save changes. It's similar in that fashion because what it does is when you modify part of the page, like you click a button and, well, so the simple example that Blazor comes with is a counter. So when you click the button, it adds to the counter and then increments just a label on the page. When you click that button, you're sending a command across SignalR Hub to the server, and you're saying current state is 0, add 1. And then it's going to go, okay, I understand that you're on this page, you've taken this action, here's the diff that you need to do to update that page. And so it's going to send a command that basically says, find this element, change its value to this. So find that label, change its value to counter equal 2. And that's the only communication that's happening. I don't know exactly what the diff looks like, but that's...
But it's not repainting the whole page.
No. It's just repainting the part of the page that needed to change. And it's only sending up it's only sending up the part of the data that actually needs to be modified. It's not sending up like your entire session state. It's only sending up a portion of the state that's being affected.
Well, it seems like it should be a lot more efficient than VC, because that's why I'm used to working with VC.
Because it does repaint the whole page.
And,
Yeah.
I've had to use Ajax to try to update portions, and it's a little bit manual. It does have a partial view that you can use for that.
Yeah, it's the way that it treats it is very similar to web forms, where you had the Ajax, Ajax update panel, and then so only that panel is what changes. It's very similar to that idea.
Okay. So does the server you're saying does not have any idea of what the whole state is?
Signaler, I don't know.
So, I mean, based on the comments I see on their site for hosting, the downside goes back to the number of connections that you have to have to the server.
So I can
but
see what you're
also the
saying.
fact that you're maintaining that client state. I mean, that's their definition.
Right. So
There-
the only way I can see that working is if it pre-renders on the server, keeps my tree, sends that to you as a cache, essentially client-side cache, and you're a thin client at that point, right? You just say, hey, do this action, you render it on the server, and then to save time, you know you've already sent the whole state, so you're just gonna say, well, I don't need to send the whole tree, just send this update because I know both of our trees are in sync.
Yeah.
But that's because I've already rendered it on the server and I've maintained that on the server.
Yeah,
Right.
but it's not like ASP.NET Web Forms session state that's like 4 megs. It's it's
Right, but
It's
but
only-
It would still be the whole DOM of the
it's still
of the
50,000 of those instances for 50,000 people.
Yeah, and the fact that you're also on a single server,
Right.
and if that single server goes through a recycle or crashes
Right.
or
And
anything,
there may be
now
some-
there goes your 50,000
There,
shoppers.
there may be some,
yeah, and it doesn't have to store the whole DOM. It only has to store the data objects that are related to the DOM. So, and I don't know what it's actually. Dang it! I don't know what it's actually doing.
Right.
I haven't gotten into that part, but it knows that you are in component X, and component X knows how to render component X. So all it has to do is maintain, like in the hub, all it really has to do is maintain the data. Now, when it's sending back down to you, it's probably sending that diff of the HTML. But when you're communicating with it, it's not having to store the HTML. It's only having to store the object state.
Well, it still has to maintain like what used to be known as I think it was page state or view state on old ASP web forms, which was the control hierarchy. Controls are now components in my mind.
So it's all
You're
components.
still going to have to maintain that. I mean, view state, at least from what I remember, you get quite large.
I think it
depending on
really.
how complex your objects are.
I think it really only has to store the serialized data. I don't think it has to store the actual component listing. It just has to store the data that's being fed into those components.
Yes, but then how would you know the hierarchy of what actually
Yeah.
gets rendered?
Say again?
How would you know the hierarchy of what